Thank you, Tanya, for this second paper being given to us today by Professor Ferran Suay from Valencia University, and he's going to be speaking to us about a project, Listen, Linguistic Assertiveness. I've heard bits of this before, so it's really good. So I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for having me. Good afternoon to everyone. Well, what I will explain here was initially designed for a language which has very different characteristics from the ones we are considering here. So Catalan is a widely spoken language, and it's highly intercomprehensible with the dominant language, which is Spanish. Okay, but then we apply this same idea of language assertiveness to the Basque language, which is quite different from Catalan and more similar to your languages, meaning it's not at all intercomprehensible with Spanish. And I will just give you a brief summary of what the main ideas of the project are, and then I will open the floor for you to ask whatever you are interested in. So we'll briefly talk about some relevant characteristics of European minoritized languages, and then why speaking your own language is important. And then I will try to define what language assertiveness is and what our proposal consists in. Okay, sorry. Well, to make a long story short, differences and similarities. The main difference would be about comprehensibility with the corresponding dominant language. In your case, it's English. In our case, Spanish. There are also important differences for the officiality status or not of the language, or if this officiality is full or only partial. Of course, the percentage or numbers of speakers might be important as well, and also the social visibility of the language. For example, here you can see bilingual signs everywhere, but it's not the same in Edinburgh or in other cities, so that's something that matters. And then things for which we are very similar, and never mind if your language is Latin derived or comprehensible or not, is the psychological impact on speakers that speaking a minoritized language has on every kind of speakers, the type of situations we are exposed to in relation to dominant language speakers and in relation to our rights, our linguistic rights, and also that all of us and all of our languages have improving options, have a margin to improve their visibility and their viability in our societies. So for example, for intercomprehension, we've got the soft side and the tough side, as you can see. So in the soft side, we've got Catalan, but also Frisian, Sardinian, other Italian languages, which are highly intercomprehensible with the dominant language. And the tough side, you've got Scottish Gaelic, Irish, Welsh, Hungarian, etc. So, of course, the expectations we can have in one or the other case are different. And then the goals we can set for ourselves should be different. As I told you, initially it comes from a situation in which we can and we do aspire to speak more or less 100% of the time in our language. I mean, I don't need to switch into Spanish when I'm living in a Catalan-speaking city or town. No need to do that. Maybe there are extreme situations, but in general, you will be understood. And of course, it's not the same for Basque or for Gaelic. Then the shortest summary I can come up with for our psychological response is that one, we feel uncomfortable while speaking our own language. And if you try to explain that to a dominant language speaker, they won't understand how could you feel uncomfortable speaking your own language in your own town or even in your own home. They won't understand it, but we all understand it perfectly, so no need to explain. Then Since we feel uncomfortable, then we switch into the DL, into dominant language, as a way to reduce this uncomfortability, which it is. We do that and immediately everything is solved. But by doing that, we are as well increasing the level of abnormality of speaking our own language. So the next time we will feel more uncomfortable and not less. So it's like a vicious circle that has to be broken somehow. Also, I would say that we've got the same type of speakers in any minoritized language. We've got speakers who are proactively submissive, meaning they start conversations through the dominant language directly, so they hide their language. We've got reactive speakers, which, for example, might try to start a conversation through the ML, but then they will switch into the DL whenever the other one is a dominant language speaker, or whenever the interlocutor insists in speaking the dominant language. And then we've got resilient people, so trying not to switch languages. That's, well, not a very common attitude. The last estimations say that more or less 1 out of 10 Catalan speakers tend to do that. And I think it might be an overestimation. So it's not a really popular way to behave, but we've got this kind of speakers. And of course, it will depend on many circumstances, such as, for example, living in a place, in an area which is mostly Catalan speaking or Basque speaking or whatever. But I would say that all of us would fall into one of these categories. Well, why is it important? I will explain that with a very simple example. We will speak about a non-existing country, the Viridian Republic. So, and to keep it simple, we'll assume that the Viridian Republic has just 4 citizens. Okay, so as in many other countries, there are 2 languages in the Viridian Republic. So in fact, the only country with only 1 language is Iceland. In every other country in Europe and in the world, there are more than 1 language. So the Viridian situation is a pretty common one. 3 of them are Viridian speakers, and 1 of them, so 25%, speaks Cramavinian, which comes from an old colonization. That's it, okay? Very simple. But of course, it will be the same with 40 million or 400 million. So the percentages will be the same. Okay, but the Viridian speakers have a specific characteristic. They switch to Cramavinian language whenever they are addressed through Cramavinian, okay? So you can see that you've got the 11 possible conversations that can happen in the Viridian Republic. How many of them in each language? You don't like numbers, but it's easy. This is easy to do. How many? Okay, I'll help you a little bit. So it's just 4 conversations in Viridian and 7 in Cramavinian, in spite of the fact that Viridian speakers are 70%. So the numbers are absolutely optimistic for any of us. And even with these kind of percentages, if you go to the Viridian Republic as a tourist and you come back home, which language would you say they speak? Cramavinian, because even if you go to the General Assembly of the Viridian Republic with the 4 members of parliament present, they would be speaking Cramavinian, because one of them does it, and then the other ones will switch into the dominant language. Okay, good. So the bottom line is linguistic submissiveness makes the language unnecessary and invisible. So that's why you as a tourist go to the Viridian Republic and come back home saying they speak Cromovinian in the Viridian Republic. So what happens if one Viridian speaker adopts a different habit and, let's say, insists in speaking Viridian even when he is addressed through Cromovinian? Well, now we have many more conversations in Viridian than we had at the beginning, and some of the conversations will be bilingual. For example, the General Assembly of the Republic will be a bilingual assembly. So it would be difficult for you as a tourist to say that Viridian is not spoken in the Viridian Republic. You would at least hear two different languages going on. And what happens if two of them do the same thing? Then we've got a clear majority of Viridian. So the bottom line is, of course, percentage of speakers and numbers of speakers are important, but much more important is what do they do with the languages, if they hide it or not, if they keep speaking it or not. So what is language assertiveness? Well, a general idea about assertiveness would be standing up for your personal rights, expressing your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs in a direct, honest, and appropriate way. Okay, it sounds very, very pretty, but to understand this, we could put it that way. So we've got a continuum between submissiveness or being manipulated and aggressiveness, attacking. And in the middle, we've got assertiveness. So assertiveness means you will pursue your own goals, but you will do it in a specific way, which avoids two things: attacking the others and accepting being manipulated. Okay? So assertive communication includes verbal and non-verbal cues and signs. And the idea is to find a good way, a convenient way to transmit your message. But I insist it's getting to reach your own objectives. So, well, a friend of mine, an academic, defines assertiveness as socially acceptable aggressiveness. Okay, so that could be a good way to put it. The idea is being determined, decide, being conscious, initiate conversations in your own language. And the idea is if you set your goals, let's say, correctly and realistically, then assertive behavior will help you to reach your own goals. Other terms which are usually related are linguistic awareness and linguistic loyalty. Many of the campaigns in favor of minoritized languages tend to focus on awareness, which might be important. But as we have seen in the case of the Viridian Republic, what is really important is speakers' behavior. What do they do with the language? Not just what kind of consciousness or awareness they have about the situation of the languages and others, etc., but what do they do with it? So we could define it that way. Means expressing yourself in your language with ease, comfort, while respecting interlocutors, free from any type of threat, coercion, or manipulation. So our idea is that training people in language assertiveness might be useful for minoritized languages as a bottom-up approach. And of course, the top-down approaches are absolutely necessary. We need rules, laws, regulations, etc. We need help from the governments. But our question or our focus is what can speakers do to help promoting their own languages? So it is a non-ideological approach, which means you don't have to be pro-independence or pro-left-wing or right-wing or whatever. So it is theoretically available to everybody and also suitable to downgrade linguistic conflict, which is which has different levels of intensity in different places. It can provide behavioral resources to minority speakers in order for them to feel more comfortable while speaking the language, and also to neutralize attacks and punishment attempts from others. These attacks don't have to be necessarily premeditated or really conscious, but it's quite common to use lines such as, let's speak English so that everyone will be able to follow, or these kind of things. And we can learn how to counterattack this kind of actions. And of course, increasing the social visibility and audibility of the language. Remember, the same number of speakers using the language more frequently would produce higher visibility of the language, and getting more speakers as well. Okay, so it's not contradictory. Well, what kind of resources are we speaking about? Mostly we're speaking about cognitive resources. So we train people to question and challenge their own prejudices. Maybe the king of prejudices would be the politeness or education prejudice. I'll speak English out of politeness, for example. That's very common. It's our own prejudices we have to debunk, not other people's prejudices. We train people to change their internal dialogue, what they say to themselves whenever they are coping with one of these situations with a dominant language speaker. It's really important to set the goals properly. And then you've got to be realistic when you're setting your goals. And that's why it's not possible to have the same goals for a highly intercomprehensible language than for a non-comprehensible language, for example. And we can, well, an important advantage is we can plan ahead, because there are not thousands of different situations we can deal with. There are a few situations that we all deal with when we are interacting with dominant language speakers. And then communication resources, such as starting conversations in your own language. Even if you are willing to switch, if you're not understood, you can start in your own language, just repeating. Well, most of the resources, I've learned them just by looking and observing dominant language speakers, because they do it very well. And many things they do, we can copy. Okay, so for example, just when you have not been understood, you just repeat, because we minority speakers can also have hearing problems. We're not perfect, I have to tell you. So it's like we react like the only reason not to be understood is that the other person doesn't understand the language, and that's not true. Many times it's just a lack of attention, for example. Okay. Well, using nonverbal communication, learning how to neutralize attacks, asking for someone competent when you want to do it. And of course, if you're buying a bottle of water, you don't have the force is not with you. But if you're buying a house or a car, maybe the force is with you. And then you can ask for someone fluent in your own language to spend your money in whatever you are willing to buy. Okay, our proposal is very simple. We design and deliver workshops addressed to different groups of people, generally between 10 and 20 attendees per workshop. You can find some resources and well, the Listen project is finishing right now, so we'll have everything on our web in a few weeks, probably. We have produced an online MOOC, a massive online open course. We've had many different types of activities and contact with many organizations. The main idea of the Listen project is to make this available through English for other European languages. So the languages being involved in the project are Welsh, Frisian, Hungarian, Am I forgetting something? I finished. And Irish, of course. And Irish, sorry. But not even Catalan is involved in the project. But then our idea is to make this available for every other minoritized language in Europe. And we can provide trainers training in order for speakers of these communities to be able to train other people in language assertiveness. Well, that's an image from one of our workshops in Friesland, in the north of the Netherlands. Not always that luxurious, I've got to tell you. And that's it. If you've got questions, I would give you this just short summary. Language submissiveness is a habit, and habits can be changed. Minority speakers need resources to be able to make their languages more visible, and every single speaker can contribute to the well-being of their own language. And also different minoritized languages can, well, import, export resources, share and learn resources from each other. And that would be quite interesting thing to adapt our strategy to languages which were not involved initially in the project. Thank you very much.